spaceexplr. We have a very special guest on today. His name is Ethan WONG. So Ethan is an avid astrophotographer from Singapore. Imaging, there are tropics is taking the images in the tropics is never easy, as he says, especially when Polaris cannot be seen. But fortunately, that has not deterred him from doing what he loves, which is taking the space photos. He wishes that more people can take some time off their screens and look up in the night skies. It's always full of surprises. Currently, a final year mechanical engineering student that hopes to pursue a postgraduate studies in the likes of cosmology or astrophysics. And of course, for more information, you definitely should get in contact with Ethan on Instagram. That's ethanw.astrophotography. And the website is going to be included in the show notes as well. Go and check it out. The things that he's talking about. So he has a lot of pictures, personal work, and a lot of great stuff. So Ethan, for you personally, I want to say again, big thank you for coming over today. Appreciate it.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've been involved with astrophotography for quite a while. So again, we connected through personal people that we know on Instagram, and I'm so happy that they made this possibly happen. And again, by looking at your work, I mean, it's phenomenal. I cannot say enough, how beautiful the work is. So
thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's yours. It's yours. So listen, can you take us back to the beginning stages, and can you talk about the moment that you got inspired? Because I think that's what everybody needs, that moment when they get inspired and they start their own personal journey in astrophotography. So how did that work for you?
Okay, so I think everybody has a similar story, but I think mine is also a little bit special because when I was younger, my parents used to bring me to our national libraries, and I remember the first book that I picked up was actually on planets. So I did not read any of the description of the planets. I just kept flipping through the images, the pictures. I love the pictures, and so I told my dad, I want to see the planets one day. Back then, telescopes were all pretty much quite expensive compared to now because there's more demand and there's more supply. But back then, telescopes were pretty expensive, and he told me to just wait and grow up and enter a university where I can use their equipment. But fast forward, I think back 5 years ago, he got me a cheap telescope for my birthday. Okay, I wouldn't say it's cheap. It's a very beginner kind of telescope. It's the Celestron Power Seeker 127 EQ. So that was the first ever telescope that I had, and I saw my first images that I saw through my eyes was actually Saturn. It was pretty small in the field of view, but it was an amazing experience, breathtaking. So from then on, I grew even more curious for the night sky. Also, my dad has a collection of cameras, so I decided, hey, why not slap on a camera to the telescope and just see what the camera can capture. And boy, the first image I pointed to was Orion Nebula, which is visible right now in the Northern Hemisphere. Wow, simply breathtaking. Until today, I still snap the images of the Orion Nebula, and I still feel the same amount of awe as I did for the first time when I saw the nebula for the first time.
And so that is beautiful. And of course, I'm sure that you can find maybe not exactly the same picture that he's talking about.
It's not.
Yeah, but it's probably going to be an updated version through the time of experience. So that is awesome. Good. So that's a good story. So again, in the beginning stages, and that's what we came for today, to provide the value for the people that want to get involved with astrophotography. So on the equipment part, what would you recommend for people? Is like DSLR enough, or people should go and get the decent mount and the scope? Like, what is your take on that?
Oh, okay. So regarding this aspect of astrophotography, I think there's not enough education or guidance. Because when I first started out in astrophotography, I did not know exactly what is a good mount or what is a good budget setup. Right? So I went to Google, and Google always gives you the most expensive equipment that you can find online, which is the no. But to me, I'm still a university student, so I have to search for the cheapest option. Okay, so without any guidance, the cheapest option usually is not the best. Okay, so I'm telling to all those beginners out there, get a star tracker. Don't get a go-to mount or whatever because they're pretty much in the top middle tier end, I would say. But the star trackers nowadays are pretty affordable, and all you need for a camera is just a simple DSLR and a kit lens. But that will give you um, the stepping stones into astrophotography.
Okay, got it. So, okay, thanks. And what will be okay? So everybody who's okay gonna go and buy the DSLR and the kind of the common sense and people understand. Look, if you're not gonna pursue with astrophotography, at least you will have a camera that you can use,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
on a day-to-day basis. Unless if you're not gonna do some upgrading, which is probably gonna mess up your camera if you're gonna do something with lenses, but so can you talk about that? Like what camera settings would be good, for DSLR? You don't have to go in very
Oh,
specifics, but
okay. So if you're starting out with a wide angle or wide field imaging, like the Milky Way, you don't really have to. I would say you don't really have to worry too much about the individual settings. So if actually you can shoot wide field with just a stationary tripod. So I tried it recently under like filtered skies. I live under bottle 8 skies, by the way. So 10 seconds maximum before your histograms blows off the chart. Yeah, 10 seconds and you just take at least 50 to hundreds of them. For me, I use an old Canon camera, which is a 60. It's pretty noisy. So just take 50 to hundreds of 10 seconds sub exposures and you stack it in the program. So I like to use Deep Sky Stacker because it is pretty straightforward and it gives pretty decent image quality after stacking. So yeah, so there are two aspects of getting into astrophotography. So first is taking the images with the DSLR, and next is the processing, which is a different game actually. But the
yeah.
first step is to get the pictures first. And so that itself, the process, I find until today, it's still an amazing process because you're just to others you are just standing outside in the dark, just pressing the shutter over and over again. But it
Okay.
feels different. Yeah, it feels different when you're doing it because you're seeing the screen refresh every 10 seconds. Like, oh, you can see something. There's something in the night sky. So for DSLR, the settings, you don't really have to worry too much. Just keep it short if you don't have a star tracker. But if you do have a star tracker, you can go for 30 seconds to 1 minute. And I'm talking about wide field because if you go, let's say 100 to 200 millimeters in focal length, um, that depends on how accurate your polar alignment is if you're using a star tracker. But for beginners, I would say that a stationary tripod is all right if you are just trying to start out in astrophotography.
Got
Yes.
it. So, sorry. So, if you don't mind me asking, what is polar alignment and how to do it? Can you expand on that for the people who never heard about that before?
Oh, okay. So there's this new weird term that every astrophotographer will say. It's called, do you have to polar align your mount? But what the heck is it? So it's basically okay, so what we astrophotographers use is an equatorial mount, not an alt-edge mount. Okay, so equatorial mount is the way to go for astrophotography. And so what it does is that how it works is that it must be pointed at the North Star, which is Polaris. So after you point to the North Star, it is called this process is called polar alignment. So if you are able to pinpoint the center of the spotting scope for the okay, so every equatorial mount will have a scope for you to point towards the North Star. So once your scope has the star centered in the reticle, you are basically polar aligned. So what this mount does, it will track the movement of the stars across the sky around the celestial pole, which is the North Star. It's a bit technical, but
Yeah, yeah,
usually when we were taught the polar alignment process, we're just taught to follow the instructions and it works. It's magic.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, there is a little bit of a technical stuff that people need to go and learn, just like in life. And anybody new that you're starting a new job, new hobby, there will be some technical
Yeah,
stuff and terminology that you need to learn. So
definitely.
part of that still, can you maybe explain to the people what are the calibration frames and how to take them as well?
Okay. For DSLR, okay, I'm just talking about DSLR imaging in general.
Mhm.
So okay, so what I realized most people trying to get into this hobby, they ask me what's the use of dark frames, flat frames, and bias frames. Okay, when I first started out, I thought it was quite pretty useless until I saw those images without these frames. Okay, so what dark frames does is it will subtract hot pixels that your long exposure image will have. Okay, if you do not remove it from your final image, you will see that your final image has little red spots or little red pixels, and these are hot pixels. So we don't want that. So the software will do what we call a dark frame subtraction. So it will subtract the hot pixels from the final stacked image to make it nicer generally. For flat frames, I don't think you would face too much of an issue if you do not have much light pollution coming from your imaging area, or if you don't have any dust on your sensor. But usually we all have that because life is not perfect. So what a flat frame does is it will remove any dust uh, or light pollution gradients, usually light pollution gradients or vignetting from your final stack image. Um, that's for flat frames. Now for bias frames, okay, I heard it's not usually required for DSLRs, but for me, my Canon 60D is super old and I need bias frames. So what it does is basically it just makes the image better, from what I understand, because I do not know the exact technicalities of what a bias frame actually does. I tried both with and without bias frames, so it made the image slightly better. Yeah, so that's what. But basically, just take as many calibration frames and take it properly if you can, because you don't want to waste your whole nights of effort after shooting lights, and then you stack and realize, oh no, there's dust, there's been anything, and you didn't correct for that. So yeah, so these calibration frames just make your final stacked image much easier to process, and it will give you, I would say it doesn't give you more details, but you're able to pull out the details much better.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for explaining us what that is. So appreciate it.
I feel
So
like a teacher.
that was good. So look, one thing that I wanted to ask you about the mounts, because it's a lot of people give a different advice on the mounts, and I would love to hear your personal take. So what do you think? First of all, maybe you can explain, because most of the time that I'm talking with astrophotographers, they're using equatorial mounts.
Mhm.
Well, at least the some that I spoke with. But can you talk about altazimuth and equatorial mounts? What is the difference between those two, and what would you prefer and why?
Okay. My first experience with handling a telescope was on an equatorial mount. Okay, so after that, I learned that it is used mostly for astrophotography and visual. Okay, so but then when I entered university, they had a whole range of scopes that used LTS mounts. So what I learned is that they use this mount mainly for visual because it does not follow the stars in the sky around the North Pole. So LS mount does not require any polar alignment. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but yeah, we don't do that for LS mount. So because of that principle itself, the mount is not able to follow the motion of the skies. Sorry, follow the motion of the stars in the skies. So that is what makes it more. I would say LS is better for visual because you just want to shoot to a certain coordinates and look at the stars for observing. But for photography, you need to track the motion of the stars with pinpoint precision. So equatorial mount does the job much better than LS mount.
Got it.
So in my
Okay.
experience, LS mount is much easier to understand because it's using our globe like coordinates such as longitude and latitude. But for
Mhm.
equatorial mounts, we use another set of polar coordinates called the right ascension and declination. Yeah,
Mhm.
declination, yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's say somebody make a decision and maybe they use DSLR for a little bit and now they want to upgrade, to and buy a scope and whatever the scope is, and maybe you can give an advice again. Maybe we can go through a little bit, later about your personal equipment and what advice you would give on us buying a scope. But let's say, talking about the lenses, like what, because that's important because most of the time people live in a very highly, very high light polluted areas. So
Mm, yes.
can you talk about the lenses that will help them to tackle that problem, and maybe what lenses there are, for them to take the astrophotography, to take the space pictures?
Okay, so for different lenses, usually when you buy your DSLR, it will come with a kit lens. I would say it's pretty good if you want to take wide field photography. But if you want to take deep sky objects, which I do, you gotta go into a much longer focal length, right? And usually for lenses at that focal length, it's pretty expensive. So okay, I think that's why people shift to using telescopes. But even when you're using telescopes, there are different kinds of telescopes, such as achromatic, apochromatic, and there are quadruplets and triplets. Okay, so basically quadruplets and triplets are apochromatic telescopes. Now these telescopes, what they do is they have extremely good color correction for imaging. For achromatic, I would say I would prefer it for visual, but some visual users use apochromatic telescopes. Now, for users who are looking into astrophotography for beginners, usually they'll start out with a DSLR lens. And so once they hit, let's say around 200 millimeters, they realize that their stars start to get trailing even on let's say a star venture, a star tracker. So that's when the need for beefier mounts or bigger mounts come in. And telescopes for that focal length range are usually much heavier than a 200 mm DSLR lens. So that's when people start to make the switch. So when they make that switch, and then they realize, oh, they want better color correction. And so that's where I would say so that's where the journey really begins when you start to upgrade the lens and start to upgrade the mount. But usually beginners will but usually I'll recommend beginners to stick with the star tracker first to learn learn the limits of your equipment first, because you can take many good images with just let's say a kit lens or 200 lens for deep space. So even for 50 millimeters on an APS-C size sensor, you can take gorgeous wide field images of the Milky Way with just subpar or substandard tracking. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So talking about your personal equipment, can you take us through what do you currently have? Maybe let's go back to the kind of beginning stages. What have you had before and what you're currently having?
Okay, so the beginning stages, you mean the first image that I ever took with my dad's camera, or
Yeah,
or is
yeah.
it?
It's just the first scope that you bought, or are you still using the same scope that you bought?
Oh. So the scope that my dad got me was the Celestron Power Seeker 127 EQ. So I don't use that for imaging anymore. It is more for visual use. So I use it to view the planets. Okay, but technically speaking, that was my first scope that I had. Okay, so then I moved on to an Explore Scientific I IXOS 100 go-to mount. So that was the first ever go-to mount that I ever used. And so my first scope with that was actually a cheap, I'm not sure if you've heard of this brand before, but it's a Vision King with achromatic refractor. So it's a funny story. I got it off an auction of eBay and it's pretty cheap. It's 160 USD. That's quite cheap. And its focal length was 600 millimeters at f6 with 80 mm of aperture. So my first few deep sky images were taken with that scope and the Explore Scientific mount. So it wasn't the best, but it was really a step up for me compared to my first ever image. So moving on, I went to search for apochromatic telescopes, which was okay. So the next scope that I upgraded to was a William Optics Z61. But the funny story is that I got it used because I couldn't afford a new brilliant optics scope. So a note to all those beginners out there, do look for used equipment because usually this equipment are well taken care of by their previous owners, and it's always much cheaper to get those scopes and those equipment at almost half price. And so I got this used brilliant optics scope, and I got many amazing images from that used brilliant optics scope. Until today, I regret selling that away because basically I sold it away to fund a bigger scope, which is coming in soon. But I kind of regret it because it was, sort of like a first love. I got many images from that, and I miss. And Brilliant Optics, their smaller scopes is pretty portable and pretty light, so I could bring it overseas, just put in a car, put in a bag. Yeah, it was quite amazing. So I kind of have regret selling that away. Yeah, but that's a good scope to start off with for beginners.
Yeah.
A good telescope.
Awesome. So of course, as I said, sometimes we regret, okay, why did I sold it? But look,
Yeah,
you're gonna buy something new. There's these all the companies coming up with something new, and again, maybe that's a good advice, by the way, buying secondhand, because most of the time, and we hope that it's most of the time, that people take care of their equipment, and you're gonna get almost pretty much new, and it's gonna be like, let's say,
yeah.
half price. So that's great advice. So talking about the post processing, so can you talk about, because there's a lot that goes on into this behind the scenes that people can then go and see on Instagram. So the final image that they see on Instagram is not the image that you see through the scope, right?
That's right. Okay. Sorry, you're saying?
Yeah. So can you talk about basically what do you use for stacking images, and what software do you use to edit them as well?
Oh, okay. So okay. When I started out in wide field astrophotography, I used this software called Sequator. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but it's a very simple and no frills stacking program. It's for wide field imaging. Yeah, so I got my first actually I can share some images with you if you like.
Please, yeah.
Okay, let me load up some. Uh-huh. Okay, so where's this? Okay. So this was an image that I took in Taiwan. It was in a holiday with my friends. So basically the first image that came out from the camera is not like that, and it's usually not so detailed. So what software I used was Sequator. So it allows you to stack wide field astrophotography together, and it's quite simple for beginners to use. But then moving on, what I use is Deep Sky Stacker, which produces images like it's for deep space imaging. So this is at around 360 millimeters focal length, but it's a crop. I think it's a 200% crop. Yeah, so for deep space images, I use Deep Sky Stacker because it is made for, I would say it's made for deep space images. So what I use for processing is actually Photoshop. I started out with Photoshop, but then after that, as I moved on along the journey, I used PixInsight, which is here. And so PixInsight is not a cheap software, but you can share with many others actually. Yeah. But for beginners, usually we'll use there are free software called Darktable. I think I used Darktable once, and it's actually quite good for free software. It's exactly like Photoshop, just that it has a little bit less control capabilities. But for Photoshop, you are able to do a lot of things with the image, like bring out details or sharpen all this. So yeah, for beginners, I would advise beginners to use Deep Sky Stacker because you're gonna use it for deep space imaging anyway, so you might as well learn it now. It's not that hard to learn. But for Photoshop, there's a little bit of learning curve, but you gotta get past that learning curve. So I detailed, okay, not really detailed, but I gave a short workflow of my Photoshop workflow on my website. So do check that out.
Okay, got it. So
Yeah.
what would you say is a pro and con on getting a Photoshop instead of learning how to do post editing with the PixInsight, let's say?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I would say that if you use Photoshop, the pros is that you can actually use that software for daytime photography and other kind of images. The cons of Photoshop is that you are not able to um it's I think to me, I believe that Photoshop is not as content aware as PixInsight when it comes to processing deep space images. So let's say for example, okay, so this is one of my images. I use PixInsight to process. But if I were to use Photoshop to process, okay, I'm not talking about the image quality, but more of the details that you
Hmm.
can resolve after processing. So what Photoshop does is, while it sharpens the certain areas of the nebulae, okay, you can use masks in Photoshop to do that. So basically what we do for post-processing is we want to sharpen the details, but not destroy the stars around the target, right? So what Photoshop does is that what I can do in Photoshop is you can mask out the stars and focus your adjustments on the nebulae. But I feel that PixInsight does a much better job at that because it's more content aware for deep space images or deep space targets. The only drawback, okay, that's the pros of PixInsight and the cons of Photoshop. However, PixInsight, the only con of PixInsight is that it is expensive. Therefore, you need to share the license. And also the cons of PixInsight is that for beginners, it can be pretty intimidating because it doesn't make sense. All the names do not make sense. Like curves transformation in Photoshop is also curves transformation in PixInsight, but it's under a different name. Like there's so many names for different processes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you're getting to any hobby, it's typical of any hobby, you tend to learn new stuff. And actually the learning process is quite fun. Think about it.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. So and there are so many different content available for people to go and learn about that. So
Yep.
so let me just yeah. So that these are amazing photos. I mean, this is something that's something that inspired me to have this conversation with you because I wanted to ask you all these questions and more like how people can get involved because it's mind-boggling when you think about these images. Like they're millions. Most of the time they're million light years
I
away
guess.
from us, and they're millions of light years in diameter. So huge objects. Nothing exists like that in our solar system. So
Yep, that's right.
yeah. So it's incredible. So yeah, and a lot of that is we talking about is a learning curve, and of course you can learn all that. It depends on the level of the passion that you have. The more passionate you are, the more you're going to go and immerse yourself, because I have people on a show that are spending 2 hours a day, sometimes 6 hours a day just learning about stuff, and they've been in astrophotography for 3 4 years and they continue to like still learning 6 hours a
Wow.
day. How people
That's pretty
find
lot.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty that's a lot of learning put
Yeah.
into astrophotography. Yeah. Okay, for me, I do learn, but I learn along the way because in the daytime I'm a student, so I don't really have much time for this in the daytime. But at night when I'm shooting, I actually do like Google or watch some YouTube tutorials
Hmm.
on how to make my images better because there's no such thing as a there's no such thing as the right answer in image processing because photography is an art. And so everyone processes their image specific to their taste. But then again, you have to get over certain basic barriers, such as how do you um, stretch the image and how do you do proper color correction. So what I feel is that if you're starting out in processing your images, it's good to do your research first before actually playing with your data because yeah, I'm someone who is easily demoralized by a failed attempt. So if I were to process my first image without any knowledge, I would have given up this hobby. Yeah, but but I'm lucky to have been able to access many tutorials on YouTube, because nowadays there are many YouTubers and making tutorials for free, and I'm very grateful to them for that, because without them I won't be able to reach this level of imaging and processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
YouTube is a good resource. There are many websites online. Okay, I think there are thousands and thousands of websites that have many different variations of their right answer, but I would say take them with a pinch of salt. Do what you think suits your processing style the most, and take it easy. I think processing is sort of like baking. It's like you put you put a food in the oven and you don't know how it will turn out. So the only thing you can hope is the only thing you can do is to pray that it comes out fine.
Yeah.
But before that, you better make sure that you put in the right ingredients.
Yes.
If not just a recipe for disaster. So yeah, so I would say astrophotography is something like baking or food making, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
That
put in the right ingredients, do your research, and you hope for the best.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Actually, I never heard somebody to describe it like this before, but that's a great way to describe that. Exactly, just getting the right ingredients first, and then of course, as I said, when it comes to post editing, and everybody makes their own personal recipe of what they like, because it's
Yeah.
what you're saying, it's an art. So everybody have a different perspective of what they want to see. So yeah, so that's it. So talking about. And again, I want to mention one other place that people can go and learn. It's Cloudy Nights.
Yes. I
It's
learned a lot from there. I learned a lot from that forum. Just a shout out to Cloudy Nights founder. Oh,
yeah,
the founders. Yeah, my bad. Yeah,
yeah,
this Cloudy Nights is an amazing forum for you to learn. Basically, if you have any questions, just pop your questions on Cloudy Nights forum, because people like me will be eager to just help you out.
exactly.
Unless you're there to this others. Yeah, I mean that whole forum is a good way to learn from each other. And there's a classifieds on Cloudy Nights, so that's where I got my brilliant optics refractor from. So I think it's a pretty good avenue for you to search for your next upgrade. Yeah,
Mhm.
just shout out to Cloudiness. It's so by far one of the best forums that I've ever encountered in my life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. 50,000 plus members. I mean, everybody's super friendly. Everybody's looking to help. So great network. So again, as you mentioned here in the bio, that you're currently in a final year of becoming a mechanical engineer. So you're studying, so going through that too, and you want to become a postgraduate. You want to take on postgraduate studies in cosmology on astrophysics.
Oh yes, yes.
So what are you leaning towards more to? Is it going to be cosmology? And of course, doing astrophotography is going to be good. Maybe
Yes.
attaching a few photos to your resume. That will give you some credit as well. So what do you want to pursue, like personally in the future?
And I would like to basically what I would like to do is to study the evolution of stars and the formation of galaxies. So I would think that leans towards cosmology, for but I'm open to studying astrophysics too, because I'm an engineer, so physics is like my second nature. Yeah.
Got
For me, I just want to make a difference to the human world, the humankind. Like I think there's so many things out there in space that are just waiting to be discovered and explored. And I mean, I mentioned in bio that it's for me it's a little sad that not many people appreciate night skies enough. Maybe it's because of their location or their
Mhm.
work life schedule or whatever. But I feel that so long as you have the time, just take some time to look up to the stars and night and think for a moment that we're also insignificant compared to the vastness of the cosmos.
Yeah, yeah. So the problem is with people not looking up and the reason why they glued to the mobile phones. And of course there's this this is not the show probably to talk about that, but the good movie to watch, it's called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen it
Oh yes,
before.
yes, I've heard of it. And my friend recommended it,
Yeah,
but I have no Netflix, so
yeah. So here you go. So that's one of the reasons why people are glued, because those business models wants them to be glued all the time, because the attention is the new currency in this day and age. But second of all, because we're stuck in the big cities, and most of the time we have all this light pollution. you know, and
That's
we like, you know, there's a lot of people who live in the cities that never seen a Milky Way before.
that's
So
me. Oh, I said I did not see a Milky Way um until I was 10 or 14 years old. Like it's pretty late. But if I had not stepped out of my house to follow my parents on that trip, until today, I dare say I would not have seen a Milky Way with my naked eye before.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
me personally, I'm just grateful that I used to go on a summer holidays when the school was over. I used to go to my grandma's place, and she used to live in a village, and it used to be like almost pitch black because they used to turn off the lights in the village, you know, to whatever save on the
Wow, that's so
electricity.
nice.
Yeah, it used to be pitch
Amazing.
black, and you can see basically satellites going through as well.
It's
So
a
that,
dream, man.
yeah,
It's a dream.
so that was really cool, you know, at that time. So you know, the fact that a lot of people cannot see that in the beginning stages or now, it's a little bit sad, you know. But hey, make sure during these times with the COVID everything, go and travel a little bit, go to the outer city, you know, places where there's, you know, no light pollution or just a little bit of it, and go and explore, you know, go and see, you know, what's happening. Take your DSLR with you, take some photos. So yeah. So if you don't mind me asking a few questions, because when you go and search out, again, if you're going to pursue to become an astrophysicist, let's say,
Yes.
the top three questions, what do you think they are? The top three questions. First
Oh,
questions, is there a God? Are there aliens? And what happens when you fell in a black hole? That's the top three questions that
oh
people
yeah,
want.
yeah. Those are pretty common, commonly asked questions,
Yeah,
which I believe we will find an answer within the next 30 years, but not anytime soon,
yeah.
because we don't really have that technology for detecting such answers. But yeah, I believe we'll find answer. We'll find the answer soon enough.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Hopefully, because I mean, there's you know, like with the Venus and phosphine, and they discovering that, and now the water in the moon, and you know,
Oh
different things.
yeah,
And I'm sure there's something maybe in Europa as well, in one of the moons. So, you know, it could be something. It could be something, and it doesn't have to be a little green man. It could be just, you know, some, you know, not bacteria like, maybe bacteria like, because again, that's something that they discovered kind of in Venus, you know, in the atmosphere. So maybe something else, maybe more advanced, less advanced, but something, you know, because again, if we look at the numbers of the galaxies, that there are billions of them, you know, it's kind of, it doesn't make sense that, you know, I see
that we are
that in,
alone. Yeah,
yeah, I see
as in,
that,
yeah, it doesn't make sense that we are alone. And
yeah,
I mean, we can't just be the only accident like from the evolution of the universe, right? I mean, there's got to be something out there. And to think that we are alone, I think one this is said this before. Like, if you think that we are truly alone in the universe, you're wrong.
yeah.
You got to
So
be pretty shallow to think that way.
exactly. So somebody said that in a movie that I was watching not long ago. It was about the space, and can't remember the name right now. But somebody said, "Look, if you're alone in this vast of the, you know, universe, and like there's nothing else, you know," that person said, "Look, it sounds like it's a waste of space." You know, which definitely sounds like it. You know, if so, who knows? Who knows? It's still to discover. So personally, I want to ask you a question about your, you know, the work that people, of course, can find on Instagram, as I mentioned. So Ethan W. Astrophotography. Make sure to go and follow Ethan there as well. So 99 posts so far. So and I mean some amazing work. So what would you consider in your personal journey so far, kind of the biggest achievement?
The biggest achievement for me, it was actually I can show you this image. It was actually this image. Give me a second. I'm finding. Oh yes.
Sure.
Yep. So it was actually this image because um to me this image appeared in NASA has this Facebook page called Sky. So what it does, it will showcase notable APOD submissions. So I submitted this for APOD, Astronomy Picture of the Day. So I didn't know it was in the group until I happened to scroll through one day, one fine day. I think it was a few weeks after I submitted through email. I saw my image there. I'm like, wait, I didn't even know this existed on their page. And by the time I looked at it, it already had, I think, around 2,000 likes. Yeah, but I didn't get an A port, but I'm pretty happy because NASA approves, you know. I
Yeah.
think But for me, I don't usually do this for recognition. I just do it because I love to see what the night sky has for us and what I'm actually imaging, what can I actually capture. But these achievements are just, it's just along the process, like it's along the way.
Yeah.
It's good to know that, you know, NASA appreciates it, but it's even better to know that many others appreciate it. So yeah, that's what keeps it going for me.
Yeah, so flying dragons, that's what it
Yeah,
is, right? Flying dragons.
was
Awesome.
fighting dragons actually.
Fighting dragons. Okay, yeah, sorry. So fighting dragons. Okay, so good. So I mean, there's some incredible work that you're doing, you know. So again, just an image that people seeing right now on the screens, you know, and more that of course you can find on Instagram. So what are the future projects besides, you know, the this type of work? You know, is there anything else that you're looking forward to in the near future that you're looking to accomplish?
Okay, so I'm waiting for my equipment to come in because there's been massive delays due to the COVID situation. So once everything is in, I want to capture the entire region of Orion in narrowband because there's something that we just cannot see with our naked eye for Orion. So what's so special to me is that Orion is something that we see every other winter, just that we don't know what's around it or we cannot see what's around it. But if you take the image of Orion through narrowband filters, you are able to see the activities. Like there's so much going on in that region. Yeah, and I just hope people can, you know, look up and just think about that. But right now they're not able to see it because yeah, I've not taken the image. And there are many other examples online, but I want to. My aim is just to showcase what is in that region, like what's the activity going on in that region, because I think it is yeah, usually people would take images of Orion, but maybe close up of a few targets in that constellation. Rarely do people take like wide field images of Orion in narrowband. So that's why I feel narrowband imaging for Orion shines out the best.
Okay, got it, got it. Okay, so we're looking forward to see these projects as well on Instagram in the near future once we're gonna get the equipment going.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, what's happening? Because we talked before I started recording yesterday. Actually, what was like two weeks ago or something like that. For the people who are watching this episode or listening to on iTunes, there was a SpaceX Crew One launch to ISS. So besides that, I mean, there's a lot of different things are happening in space industry. And again, part of you being a space engineer student, so do you pay attention to what's happening, and maybe you can share something that people not aware of, but they should be looking at these future projects?
I would say is the SpaceX satellite launches or rocket launches. And that's something that people don't really they don't really know like why. Okay, this satellite is being launched into space, but for what? Okay, so when my first experience with the satellites in space is actually a visit to a dark side, which was last year. And so SpaceX just launched their 13, was it 13? The entire constellation of satellites. I think it was 2 days later that I went to the dark side and I saw it with my very own eyes. It's really just like, Santa Claus riding with all these white lights in one line, following each other, up one after another across the night sky. So that was my first experience with satellites in the night sky. So it made me think that actually not many people know about the existence of such satellites. Like, okay, maybe because most of us live in light polluted cities, so we are not able to see such satellites. But I think it's a very special meaning to launching this kind of satellites in night sky. And also, I think if you're in the States or if you're in the yeah, basically if you're in the States, if you have a chance to catch a satellite launch, do catch it because I think every satellite launch is a very historic moment in humankind. And it's not really that you get to see a satellite being launched into space.
Yeah, exactly. So would you think, because somebody that I had previously on the show, they mentioned that, having more satellites in a, in an orbit, in a close orbit, it,
Oh,
it, it will
okay.
become a problem for for astrophotography and for observatories on the ground, because there will be so many. I mean, there are already a lot. We talk in
Mhm.
thousands, and there will be many more thousands. I think in the next few years that they're talking about like 5 more thousand satellites in space, because again, we need the internet connection. We want the cable TV, we want the TV, we want everything on demand right now here and access on the phone, so we can continue to stay glued on it. So what do you think, like, how big of a problem from your personal perspective is it going to be in the future?
Okay, personally, okay, of course, I know about this issue. So personally, well, I think that satellites they are still good to humankind, right? Because they serve as a purpose. I don't think astrophotographers and researchers should be that worried. Okay, also because the processing software now these days can actually remove satellite trails, or basically they reject foreign objects and artifacts. So I would expect the software in the future to be able to detect that this is not a star, this is not a target, this is a satellite. You just remove the satellite from the stacked image, and all this have got to do with machine learning. So I believe that in the future, this problem will become this problem is really unfounded in the future. Yeah,
Hmm.
I rely on, basically I'm just hoping that technology will catch up by then, such that our computing and processing capabilities are good enough to actually um, reduce the worry of all these satellites in the night sky. And for
Yeah.
now, it's an issue because our current software and processing and stacking software are not able to reject these satellite trails 100%. But
Hmm.
in the future, I'm pretty sure with the advancement in machine learning
Yeah.
technologies and capabilities, all these issues will become diminished or even removed in the future.
Good. Okay. Okay. So thank you for your take on that. And again, at the same time, I heard that Elon Musk is talking about blacking out, kind of painting, whatever it's
Oh
called.
yeah.
I'm sure it's not painted. Well, maybe it's painted kind of black color, so you won't be able to see the satellites. So they'll already they understand, because it's going to be a problem for observatories and astrophotographers across the world, and they're looking to tackle that problem themselves also. So that's good. And what you mentioned, there will be more advanced technology and softwares that will allow us to get rid of the trails, once you're going to be taking the photos. So on that note, I mean, do you see anything happening, or maybe some from your personal perspective, if we talk about kind of, machine learning or AI that would kind of help with astrophotography or just space exploration in general in the near future?
Okay, I have a personal experience with machine learning, but it's for image processing. Not so much on the space exploration aspect, but so basically after we process our images, we use Photoshop. Sorry, Topaz. Topaz has this function software called denoise AI or sharpen AI. So what it does is it has a machine learning software algorithm built into this package. So it will analyze different parts of the image and it will reduce the noise accordingly. So it's somewhat like a content aware function, but just that you don't have to tell it what to do. It knows what. So I think this is the stepping stone for many other softwares to work on and include more AI technologies into their processing software. As for space exploration, from my understanding, I know AIs have been used in simulation models to simulate um, black holes and stuff. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
So so that's the aspect of AI that I know that's currently in use for space exploration. So I consider this as space exploration in terms of like simulation and everything. But yeah, I think AI is gonna, I won't say take over the world, but it will revolutionize the world in the future
Mhm. Yeah.
in terms of
Exactly. So for the people that are looking to learn more about the Sharpen AI, you can go to the topazlabs.com, and you're going to find the Sharpen AI. Basically, creates tack sharp images with no artifacts or halos. and it's a price of $80 currently, or you can try it for free. So and again, that's the software that you mentioned there. So on that note, I do agree there will be more and more machine learning and AI involved into space exploration in general, because I had a guest on my show prior, and she's going through Advanced X program, which is a commercial astronaut program, and she's looking to become one as well. And she said basically going through that program, of course, it's a very strict criteria. A lot of it is, all based on health and education and how you can handle mental issues and, problem solving stuff, things like that. But she said that basically the process, who will decide, who will become, and I'm sure it's not going to be one, it's going to be multiple people, but it's not going to be human. It's going to be this AI technology who's going to make those decisions. So,
Oh,
so yeah, so I thought that was very interesting, Yeah, so it's already
pretty
there.
interesting.
Huh?
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. So here we go. So there is less and less human, I think, decision making will be involved, maybe with the things like that in a near future, which I think is very near. So again, talking about coming back to this learning curve and learning stuff. I mean, because you're a young guy, so I'm sure you learn multiple ways, and maybe if it's not top three books that you can recommend, maybe you can recommend like top three resources online that people can go and learn about astrophotography.
Okay. I actually do have a few channels or people that I would say look up to for astrophotography. So first, it is, I think he's been mentioned many times before, but it's Trevor Jones, because he is a pretty humble guy. Shout out to Trevor.
Yeah.
So he basically documented his journey into astrophotography with a simple DSLR and I think a star tracker, if I'm not wrong. So he documented his process, his failures, his ups and downs. So I think he's a very good person to actually learn your journey into astrophotography. So I would say the next resource that I constantly turn to is actually Cloudy Nights forum members. I can't name a few because there are just too many of them. Basically, I learned a lot from other people's mistakes on their forums. So every day there'll be someone who goes like, I have an issue, like, can anyone help me troubleshoot this? And then there'll be many people chiming in. So that's what I love about this community. It's very tight knit, and if you have any issues, people won't hesitate to step in to help you. And so actually I learned a lot from Cloudy Night, because it is not in a video format, but it's more of like you just scroll through and you find what you want. So the third best resource I would say is actually image processing software books. So I don't really have a solid example that I always refer to, but I usually I won't say go to the library, but I go online repositories and search for image processing techniques. Also because I'm an engineer, right? So what I'm learning now, a lot of theory actually can be applied to image processing. So I use that to make sense of what I'm doing. Like sharpening actually uses a certain kind of function. There's some math to it, but I appreciate it even more. So these books allows me to do my processes logically and not just by eyeballing certain details. I mean, eyeballing can get you somewhere, but you got to fall back on theory sometimes if all else fails, which usually happens to me.
Yeah. So that's it. It's like a lot of it is just getting involved. Because I have a lot of people on a show, they're talking about, I didn't read any books. I just go and watched a few YouTube videos. I just duplicated what these people did, just like Trevor, himself, which again, if you didn't explore Trevor's content yet, make sure to go and subscribe to his channel. So it's called, I think it's Backyard Astrophotography. As far as
Astro Backyard.
Astro Backyard.
Yeah.
Here we go. So make sure to go and subscribe, because this content is is unbelievable. I mean, if you're looking to learn on how to learn in detail, because he's doing all the reviews and basically the equipment that he's working with, and everything is in such a detail, and he doesn't talk on you down. He's like explaining, okay, this is what I'm working with, and if you like that, if you like the process, you know, and the images that he gets, you can just follow and duplicate exactly what he does. And that's what people do. And they don't read the
Yes.
books, they just watch the videos and get involved with it. So that's really awesome. So again, on your personal notes, on a personal journey, I mean, you're continuing now to become, again, cosmology, on astrophysics, maybe getting involved with space engineering at some point, who knows, right? So besides that,
Maybe. Maybe.
what is your personal legacy that you're looking to leave behind you as well?
I would love to be known as the guy or remembered as the person on forums, not maybe not in real life, that hey, he helped me before. And I'll just, because I like to help others. And it's good. I feel good knowing that I actually impacted someone's life through, helping one another out. Because when I was at, I wouldn't say I was at my lowest, but during those times where I had issues, like major issues, these people, random people, just kindly stepped in to help me and give me advice. So yeah, that was really all that's needed to push me on into this hobby, because it can get really daunting at times, but all you need is actually a helping hand to guide you along the way. Not really spoon feed me, but rather just tell me that what you're doing is right. You're not on the wrong track. Just do what you think is right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of this hobby, because it's not okay. Not many people do this as a hobby, but for those that do it, they are pretty passionate and they're pretty. Um, I'll say they're pretty honest people and they're really kind people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I can say exactly the same. Everybody that I meet, just like yourself, everybody's is looking to, to give a handout, and they're looking to help other people, and they're always available if people have questions. So I'm sure Ethan is going to be exactly the same. So if you want to get in contact with him again through Instagram, find the link down below, and follow him and follow his journey and become part of his journey. Ask him questions about equipment, post processing, how do you get involved, how much does that cost, all the things. And of course, get involved with the forums, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, just like Trevor's, and go and become part of this big network, which is now growing because there's more and more attention going to space and exploration. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing. So Ethan, for you personal, I want to say again, big thank you for coming over today, for sharing your personal journey, passion, and giving all these tips and strategies on how people can get involved. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine, because yeah, it's not every day that I get to do podcasts.
Here you go. It's going to be more. Look, the more will be coming up. So we can have Ethan back for sure for a next episode, so we can go, in detail on a few topics. And of course, we're going to do some, questions on the different platforms. So maybe you can leave, your question down below here on this episode, and, something that you want us to go, in depth next time when we're going to have Ethan on. So make sure to leave your question. So again, guys and girls, before we're going to go, one thing I want to ask you, as always, if you share this episode to the friend of yours, that person who maybe talked about, doing something astrophotography related, or maybe a person who has no clue what they want to do in life, it's going to be a great episode for them to get inspired and maybe pursue something with astrophotography or anything space related. So again, Ethan, thank you so much for coming over today. It's been a true pleasure to get to know you. And
it was a nice session.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, and guys, as always, I'll see you on the next episode. And don't forget, keep exploring.